It never looked like danger. It looked like routine. A nurse on the tail end of a 12-hour shift. A quiet road cutting through a warm Texas night. A canopy of humming fluorescent lights. And a smile that seemed harmless. That's how it began for Emilia Solís. Not with a scream or a siren, but with the simple habit of stopping for gas at the same place she always did, San Paloma, Texas. Sunstop 24, on West Cielo Drive, a convenience store that never slept, and a parking lot that felt familiar enough to make you forget what the dark can hide. On August 24, 2022, just after 11:41 p.m., a grainy camera caught Emilia's silver Corolla gliding into frame. Her hair was pulled back, her hospital badge still clipped to her scrubs, the fabric creased with the fatigue of a shift that had stretched longer than it should have. She'd spent her night at Santa Re Medical Center, where she was known for what you notice after the machines quiet down, the way she would pause to tuck a blanket around a shivering patient, the way her voice leveled the panic in a room when seconds mattered, the way she said, with a certainty that felt like a promise, "You're safe now." People remembered the feeling more than the words. Emilia was that feeling. She was 28, a night nurse who learned early that calm is contagious, that kindness can pull someone back from an edge you can't see. She lived in a small second-floor apartment on Laurel Bend, loved peach tea and old Tejano ballads, fed a stray cat that started waiting for her car each dawn. She called her mother every night without fail. She was the kind of daughter who remembered your favorite song, the kind of friend who said yes when you were sure everyone would say no, the kind of nurse who believed that small acts stack into a kind of armor. Routine gave her space to breathe. Routine felt like safety, until routine was the trap. The footage shows Emilia stepping out, propping the nozzle, glancing at her phone with the soft, absent smile of someone reading a text from home. Moments later, a black Dodge Avenger rolled in from the far entrance and idled 2 pumps away. The driver would later give a dozen names and wear none of them well. On paper, he would be Cole Asher Vane, 34, a drifter who kept changing addresses the way other people changed passwords, and a man who had learned to make curiosity look like conversation. He walked by once, did not stop, walked by again, slower. The clerk inside would later tell police he thought the guy was just bored. The camera caught a flick of movement, Vane gesturing toward Emilia's car, his mouth forming the kind of small-talk strangers trade under neon lights. She answered with the polite half-smile of a woman who has comforted 1,000 strangers and knows that courtesy is an instinct, often performed, sometimes regretted. She paid inside. He lingered. If you freeze the footage at 11:46 p.m., you can see him angle his shoulders as if to memorize her, as if to test the moment and decide it could be stretched. That's where the line was drawn. That's where he decided to cross it. The next morning, Emilia mentioned him to a coworker as an afterthought, something like, "He was chatty, nothing weird." She shrugged and moved on. Life did not. By August 26, an account called C. Vane sent her a message on Facebook. "Hope you got home safe." "Long nights, huh?" She ignored it. Another message appeared the same evening. "Saw you again, driving down Cielo. You always stop at Sunstop." The words made her put the phone down for a second. That detail always felt like a hand on the back of her neck. She told her best friend from the ER, Talia Quintero, that she might switch stations. "It's probably nothing," Emilia said with a quick, embarrassed laugh. "I keep thinking I'm being dramatic." She wasn't. But fear rarely announces itself as certainty. It arrives as doubt. And doubt is easy to dismiss when you're used to being the strong one. On August 27, Emilia finished charting at 10:49 p.m. She texted her mother, Rafaela Benitez, like always, "Heading home, Mama. I'll call in 20. The night was thick, the heat unspooling slow, the kind that clings to your throat. At 11:16 p.m., the silver Corolla rolled under the Sunstop canopy again. Same pump, same habit. She left the nozzle locked in, stepped toward the convenience store door. A black Avenger drifted into the far corner, as if obeying a script. The driver wore a dark hoodie, though the night was hot enough to press sweat to the small of your back. He passed behind her in the reflection of the refrigerator glass. The timeline that followed would be measured in minutes, then seconds. At 11:18 p.m., Emilia returned to the pump. At 11:19, Vane appeared at the edge of the frame, his posture casual, his head tilted with the practiced softness of a man who learned the cadence of trust but never the weight of it. He said something small. We will never know what. Her phone fell to the concrete at 11:20. There is a blur, a pivot, a fierce, sudden motion, the body language of refusal. Two figures slide out of the camera's view toward the shadowed edge of the lot, where the canopy light breaks into patchy darkness. The clerk said he heard nothing above the hum of the soda cooler and the soft ping of the door. Silence can be loud enough to erase a life. By 7:05 a.m. the next morning, Emilia had not clocked in. She was never late. Calls from her supervisor went to voicemail. A nurse from day shift drove her route and circled the lot at sunstop twice, then called Rafaela. When Emilia's mother answered, the shape of the day collapsed. At 9:12 a.m., Officer Jaime del Toro took the missing person report at the Solís family's small stucco house off Nopal Street. He made a note that would end up printed in bold in the case file. Caller insists behavior is highly uncharacteristic. That phrase is shorthand for a grief you don't let yourself feel yet. Detectives from San Paloma PD took over by noon. Detective Sylvia Aranda, compact, measured, eyes that moved like they had a metronome. Detective Brooks Landry, methodical, with a dry wit that always arrived late. They pulled traffic cameras, gas station footage, cell records. Emilia's phone pinged for the last time at 12:03 a.m. near a scrubland pullout on Farm Road 3179, about 29 miles north of town. Search volunteers gathered by 1:30 p.m., many still in scrubs, some with their hairnets pulled down around their necks like blue scarves. They walked fence lines and ditches in the kind of heat that makes time feel like a dare. At 2:11 p.m., a respiratory therapist from Emilia's unit, Janelle Ortiz, spotted a laminate card, half hidden in Johnson grass, a hospital badge reel, ribbon striped in faded coral and white. The name was missing, torn clean from the clip. The nurses knew the accessory. It's hers, Janelle said, and the sentence settled over the road like dust. The break came quickly. The sunstop cameras showed a black Dodge Avenger with a dented rear quarter panel and a bumper sticker, half peeled from the heat, a claw mark, white on black. The plate was catchable in fragments. It took Landry 2 hours and a call to a trooper he'd gone to high school with to get a short list. The car that matched the plate and the dent belonged to a man who'd moved into a small rental off Verde Ridge. No landline, prepaid phone, late on rent, Cole Asher Vane. The name drew nothing in county case files at first glance, and then everything. A string of arrests under aliases in other counties, harassment that pled down, trespass that got deferred, a protective order violated and then abandoned when the complainant moved and stopped showing up to court. A pattern without a headline. Aranda and Landry knocked at 4:32 p.m. No answer. The Avenger sat half hidden behind the duplex, water beading on the tires like it had been washed recently. There was mud in the treads, stubborn as an alibi. When a judge signed off on the search at 7:09 p.m., the detectives moved quick. Inside, paint peeled from 2 walls. The mattress lay on the floor. In a drawer, they found a small zip bag with a pearlescent earring, tear-shaped, backing still attached. In a cardboard shoebox, tucked in a tax folder, they found a blue and coral ribbon lanyard, the same pattern as the reel found on Farm Road 3179. In the Avenger, they lifted a smear from the inside of the driver's door. The presumptive test blushed dark. The lab later named it. The name was Emilia's. They picked him up at 10:21 p.m., 2 streets away, near a pay-by-the-week motel called the Lone Lantern. The arrest report notes that he smiled when he heard why he was wanted. Then he stopped. Then he tried to talk. The interview room is a place where lies go to see if they can stand. Vanes arrived in a pack. He said he'd only chatted with Emilia at the station, that she'd seemed lonely. He said she'd asked him for directions. He said she'd invited him to follow her home to make sure no one else did. He said they kissed. He said she'd changed her mind. He said she'd panicked. Detective Aranda kept the question simple, the air empty of judgment so the words would spill. 2:07 a.m. She slid a photo across the metal table, the earring from his drawer, resting on the interview room's unforgiving light. The air in the room changed shape. 2:18 a.m. She mentioned the smear in the car. 2:27 a.m. She asked where he drove at 12:03 a.m. when her phone stopped talking to the tower. He stared at the camera in the corner like it could give him a better story. 2:35 a.m. His voice softened into something like a child. She fought too hard, he said, like a confession and a complaint. I didn't mean to kill her. Aranda wrote the sentence the way you write a chord. They found Emilia on August 29 at 4:22 p.m. after a ranch hand called in vultures circling over an oil field access road off State Spur, 31 miles north of San Paloma. Tire tracks veered from dirt to scrub to a stand of mesquite where a silver Corolla crouched under branches as if trying to make itself small. The driver's window was shattered, keys still in the ignition. On the ground, a pattern of struggle had pressed into dust, the polish of a shoe scuffed white, the crescent of a broken nail. 10 yards away, loosely covered by brush, lay Emilia. She was still in her scrubs. Someone had tried to cover what they had done and hadn't had the patience for the job. The medical examiner would call it asphyxiation. No defensive wounds that suggested a long fight. A short, brutal one. The kind where one decision carries you over a cliff and gravity writes the rest. The arraignment was quiet. The courtroom wasn't. News spread fast in a town where the night shift knows the day shift's children by name. At Vane's first appearance, he looked smaller than his arrest photo, like the cage of the county lockup had taught him the language of stillness. The charge read, capital murder. A gaggle of local reporters crowded behind the last row with cameras they apologized to no one for. The judge denied bond. The case moved faster than most because Aranda and Landry's file was built like a spine footage, timeline, car, drawer, blood, confession. What no one saw until later was the other spine the DA's office began to assemble. Vane's past. A paper trail that stretched across counties like a map of bad choices, and doors people shut too late. 10 years earlier, in Colt Springs, a waitress had filed a protective order after a man she'd served coffee to started waiting outside her apartment 3 nights a week, tapping his knuckles on the window panes and telling her she'd led him on with the way you pour the sugar. The case died when she moved. 6 years ago in North Cayenne County, a veterinary assistant reported a customer who followed her from the clinic and parked behind her building. He was warned, then warned again. The warnings taught him only where the lines were. He learned to stand a foot away from them and smile. The trial began March 13, 2023. The courtroom was cold the way courtrooms always are, like the air itself is an argument for composure. District Attorney Penelope Shaw was a focused voice in a neat navy jacket, a legal pad organized in a way that made other legal pads stand straighter. She called the case predatory fixation masquerading as charm. The defense pushed a diminished capacity theory, suggested Vane was the sum of untreated disorders and impulsivity, a man without brakes rolling downhill. Shaw did not shout. She stacked bricks. The messages, the surveillance, the repetition, the car wash done too soon. The confession slipped too easily from the mouth of someone who expected forgiveness to arrive like a late bus. The Sunstop clerk testified. So did Janelle, who found the badge reel. So did Officer Del Toro, whose report read, highly uncharacteristic. Detective Landry walked jurors through timestamps with the dry patience of a man who respects clocks. Detective Aranda told them what he said at 2:35 a. She fought too hard. At one point, Penelope Shaw let the room be silent just long enough for the sentence to settle into the jurors' bones. Then she spoke the line that made two of them look down. He mistook kindness for invitation, and when kindness said no, he took her breath as payment for his disappointment. Rafaela testified for exactly 9 minutes and 41 seconds. She held the handkerchief her own mother had carried to church for 3 decades. When Shaw asked if she remembered their last text, Rafaela nodded. "Heading home, Mama. I'll call in 20. In the gallery, Talia pressed her palms together the way she does before a code blue, as if God could be summoned by posture. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On March 24, they filed back into the box with faces that had learned a new way to be tired. They returned a verdict of guilty on capital murder. The judge, Hector Valdivia, pronounced life in prison without parole. Vane looked up like he had misheard the length of forever. Rafaela exhaled the breath she had held since August. Then she cried in a way that made a bailiff look away because it felt like a prayer he had no right to overhear. The headlines did what they always do. They told a story with the edges filed down. But in San Paloma, the story seeped into routines. Nurses changed where they stopped for gas. Grocery clerks walked each other to cars. High schoolers texted their mothers the second they left work. Sunstop 24 installed 2 new cameras and floodlights that burned the lot into day. The city council passed a resolution. Only the people who showed up to speak would remember. And then they did something people would. They funded a program called Safe Stops San Paloma, requiring 24-hour stations to maintain full lot video coverage, keep blue light emergency call boxes operating, and designate clearly marked, continuously monitored spaces near the storefront for late-night fueling. The county sheriff's office added guardian patrols, quarter-hour passes by stations between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The state representative for the district drafted the Night Worker Safety Act, which bundled funding for station lighting, a small grant program for security upgrades, and mandatory safety signage advising customers to keep phones in hand, scan surroundings, and move to the store if approached. The law did not change the past. It taught the future to look up. At Santa Re Medical Center, they mounted a small plaque outside the break room. The brass is plain, the engraving is not, in memory of Emilia Solís, who carried calm into chaos, for every life she touched and the one we lost. Each August 29, the night staff brings sunflowers and leaves them beneath the plaque. Charge nurse Belinda Ruiz started a ritual. Whenever a new nurse joins the unit, they tell them about Emilia, not the end of her life, but the way she kept a hand on a shoulder, an extra beat, the way she called family members from her own phone when the hospital line wouldn't go through, the way she reminded trainees that people remember how you made them feel long after they forget the charting codes. Talia helped Rafaela start the Solís Trust, a small nonprofit with a practical aim: ride vouchers and escorted walk programs for night shift workers, self-defense workshops subsidized for healthcare staff, personal safety coaching that includes digital hygiene, like locking down social profiles and clearing geotags. Monthly sessions fill fast. The first time they taught a room of 27 how to say no out loud in a way that carried past politeness. The sound was jolting. Then it was beautiful. When Talia stands in front of those classes and says the sentence that brought a dozen women to tears, she isn't performing. She's telling a truth she wished she could have delivered earlier. Kindness is not consent. Thank you for watching Evidence Uncovered. If you believe Emilia's story matters, if you believe every late-night nurse, every cashier, every warehouse worker, every student closing a cafe at 1 a.m. deserves to get home, please like, share, and subscribe. Share this with someone who works nights. Add your safety tips in the comments so the next person scrolling at a gas pump at midnight reads something that changes what happens next. For Emilia, for the names we don't yet know, for the choices that keep them here.